Here's a question most parents never ask themselves until it's almost too late. If your retirement plan runs out or falls apart, who do you think is actually going to step in? You already know the answer. It's your kids. Not the government, not a distant relative, not some safety net that magically appears. Your children. And here's the uncomfortable part almost nobody says directly, even though the data confirms it over and over. This is already happening, right now, to millions of families, and most of them never planned for it, never talked about it, and never saw it coming until they were standing in the middle of it. If you've ever felt a quiet guilt about what your retirement might eventually cost the people you love most, that instinct is not paranoia, it's awareness of something real. Nearly 1 in 4 American adults is currently providing unpaid care for an aging family member, according to the 2025 AARP and National Alliance for Caregiving report. That's not a small, unlucky group. That's 63 million people, a number that has grown 45% in just the last decade. And here's the detail that should genuinely stop you. Half of those caregivers report at least one direct negative financial impact from doing it: depleted savings, new debt, reduced retirement contributions of their own, lost income from cutting back hours or leaving jobs entirely. The people caring for aging parents are, on average, 51 years old, which means they are simultaneously trying to build their own retirement while quietly funding or managing someone else's care. 29% of family caregivers are what's now called the sandwich generation, supporting both aging parents and their own dependent children at the exact same time. Now let's talk about what this actually costs in real numbers, because vague warnings don't change behavior, specifics do. The average family caregiver spends approximately $7,200 a year out of pocket, covering food, transportation, medications, and supplies. For long-distance caregivers, people managing a parent's care from another city or state, that number climbs to nearly $8,700 annually. And that's just the DIY version, family members doing the work themselves. The moment professional care becomes necessary, the numbers change entirely. According to the 2025 Care Scout Cost of Care Survey, the national median cost of a private room in a nursing home is now over $129,000 a year. A semi-private room runs nearly $115,000. Assisted living communities average around $74,400 annually. In-home care with a professional aide runs about $80,000 a year, assuming 44 hours a week. These are not worst-case numbers. These are the median, meaning half of all families pay even more than this. Here's the number that connects all of this together, and it's the one most people have never actually heard stated plainly. 70% of Americans turning 65 will need some form of long-term care during their remaining lifetime. Not might need it, 70% will need it. And Medicare, the program most people assume will cover this, explicitly does not. Medicare covers short-term skilled nursing after a hospital stay, up to 100 days, full stop. It does not cover custodial care, the ongoing help with bathing, dressing, eating, and daily living that most long-term care actually consists of. Medicaid will eventually cover it, but only after a person's assets are nearly exhausted, which means the backup plan most families are unknowingly relying on requires becoming functionally broke first. So here's the real question underneath everything we just covered. If 70% of people will need this kind of care, and the average cost runs anywhere from $75,000 to over $125,000 a year, and Medicare doesn't cover it, who do you think fills that gap when there's no plan in place? It's not an abstract policy question. It's your kids. absorbing $7,000 a year here, cutting their own retirement contributions there, sometimes moving in, sometimes taking out debt, sometimes leaving a job entirely, the way Dana Bice did, a sales rep in Baton Rouge who spent over $162,000 out of pocket in a single year for round-the-clock care for his bedridden mother, while simultaneously paying for his daughter's college tuition. That's not a rare, tragic outlier story. That's what an unplanned version of this looks like when it lands on a real family with no structure in place. This is the moment to reframe what leaving something to your children actually means, because most people get this backwards. The instinct is to think of a good retirement plan as one that maximizes what you leave behind, the inheritance, the number in the will. But the data tells a different story about what actually changes a child's life. It's not primarily the money you leave them, it's the burden you don't leave them. A retirement plan that protects you from becoming a financial and caregiving emergency for your children is worth more to them than almost any inheritance, because it protects their own retirement, their own marriage, their own career, and their own kids from getting quietly consumed by a crisis nobody planned for. 88% of family caregivers say they aren't currently getting enough support. That's not a support system problem to solve later. That's a signal that the system everyone assumes exists simply doesn't, and the only real protection is the plan you build before you need it. So let's talk about what that plan actually looks like, because this isn't abstract, and every piece of it is something you can act on starting this month. The first piece is long-term care insurance, and the timing here matters enormously because this is a product that gets dramatically more expensive or entirely unavailable the longer you wait. Premiums are underwritten based on age and health, which means buying in your 50s while you're still healthy locks in rates that can be a fraction of what the same coverage costs a decade later, if you can even qualify at that point. This single decision can be the difference between a care event draining a family's combined savings versus being an insured, budgeted expense that never touches your children's finances at all. The second piece is your health savings account, if you have access to one, and it's consistently underused for exactly this purpose. Contributions reduce your taxable income now, growth is tax-deferred, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses, which explicitly includes many long-term care costs, come out completely tax-free. Building this account aggressively during your working years creates a dedicated, tax-advantaged pool specifically earmarked for the health and care costs that are statistically almost certain to arrive. The third piece is the one people avoid the longest, not because it's expensive, but because it's uncomfortable. The actual legal documents, a durable power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, an updated will, and ideally a conversation, out loud, with your children about what you actually want if you become unable to make these decisions yourself. Here's why this matters more than people expect. Without these documents in place, your children don't just face emotional stress during a health crisis, they face legal obstacles, sometimes requiring court involvement, just to make basic medical or financial decisions on your behalf at the exact moment when speed and clarity matter most. This is one of the few pieces of a retirement plan that costs almost nothing and prevents an enormous amount of downstream chaos. The fourth piece is understanding how the money you eventually pass down actually gets taxed, because a poorly structured inheritance can quietly cost your children tens of thousands of dollars they never needed to lose. Under current law, most non-spouse beneficiaries who inherit a traditional IRA or 401k are required to withdraw the entire balance within 10 years, and every withdrawal counts as ordinary taxable income for them, often stacking on top of their own peak earning year's salary and pushing them into a higher tax bracket than they'd choose voluntarily. This is why many financial planners now recommend strategic Roth conversions during retirement, paying the tax on that money yourself at your own likely lower retirement tax rate, so that what eventually passes to your children comes out tax-free on their end, instead of creating a surprise tax bill during what's already an emotionally difficult year for them. The fifth piece is the conversation itself, and this is the one the data says almost no family actually has early enough. Certified financial planner Carolyn McClanahan has said directly that financial caretaking conversations should happen years before they're actually needed, not in the middle of a crisis. And yet, most families wait until a health event forces the conversation, at which point decisions get made under stress without full information, often creating exactly the kind of family conflict everyone was trying to avoid in the first place. A single honest conversation where you tell your children what accounts exist, where documents are kept, what your wishes actually are, and what insurance is or isn't in place, does more to protect your family's future than almost any single financial product you could buy. Here's what ties all 5 of these pieces together, and it's worth sitting with for a second. The population aged 65 and older topped 61 million in 2024, up 13% in just 4 years. Life expectancy at 65 now extends nearly 21 more years for women and over 18 more for men, both increases from just 2 decades ago. That's genuinely good news, more years of life. But more years also means more years where long-term care becomes statistically likely, and the generation currently in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, raising kids and building careers, is going to be the generation absorbing that need at a scale we've genuinely never seen before, unless the planning changes now, in this generation, starting with you. This is why the framing in the title of this video isn't sentimental exaggeration. Your children will thank you not primarily because of what you leave them financially, though that matters too, but because of what you don't leave them. The $7,000 annual drain, the reduced retirement contributions, the reduced income from stepping back at work, the legal scramble without documents in place, the surprise tax bill on an inherited account. A retirement plan built with these 5 pieces in place is not just protecting your own future, it is directly, measurably protecting theirs, at the exact moment in their own lives when they're least equipped to absorb an unplanned financial shock, usually while they're raising their own kids and trying to fund their own retirement simultaneously. If you're sitting here realizing you don't have long-term care coverage, don't have updated documents, or haven't had this conversation with your kids yet, I want to be clear that this isn't about doing everything overnight. It's about picking the highest leverage piece and starting there. If you're in your 50s or early 60s and healthy, long-term care insurance pricing only gets worse from here, so that's often the most time-sensitive piece. If you're already past the point where that insurance makes financial sense, the legal documents and the family conversation become your highest leverage moves because they cost nothing but time and prevent an enormous amount of downstream chaos regardless of what happens financially. And if you already have significant retirement savings in traditional accounts, looking into strategic Roth conversion timing with a fee-only fiduciary advisor could be the single move that saves your children real money on the back end. None of this is about assuming the worst is coming. It's about understanding that the data already tells us what's statistically likely. 70% of people will need long-term care. Half of all caregivers face financial harm. And building a plan now while you have the most options and the most control, instead of leaving your children to build one under pressure, without documents, without insurance, and without a conversation, in the middle of a crisis nobody chose. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing here constitutes financial, legal, or investment advice. Always do your own research and consult qualified professionals before making any financial decisions. If this changed how you think about what your retirement plan is actually protecting, hit like, because that tells this platform to put this in front of the next parent who's been avoiding this exact conversation with their own kids. Subscribe if you want the deeper breakdown coming next on how to actually run that family conversation without it turning into an argument. Comment and tell me honestly, have you had this conversation with your parents, kids, or both? Because I want to know how many families are actually talking about this before it becomes an emergency. Share this with a sibling or family member you've been meaning to have this conversation with but keep putting off, because the data is clear that putting it off doesn't make the need go away. It just moves the decision from your hands into a crisis. The best gift you can give the people you love isn't a bigger number in a will. It's making sure they never have to choose between caring for you and caring for their own future.